Hello and welcome to another episode of the Live Thrivingly podcast. I'm your host, Jackson Hall, and I'm super excited to have you here today. Wherever you are in the world, I invite you to pause, take a breath, and tune in as we illuminate stories and perspectives that explore what it means to truly thrive. This season, we continue our journey, part of the larger Live Thrivingly project, to unpack the human condition, celebrate cultural insights, and share interpretations of life from voices across the globe. From personal awakenings to ancestral wisdom, from daily rituals to paradigm-shifting ideas, we're here to explore what it truly means to live thrivingly, with depth, presence, and a devotion to restoring wholeness in our lives and communities. Today's guest is a passionate advocate for wildlife and a storyteller with a deep love for nature's most misunderstood creatures, wolves. After beginning her journey of volunteering at the Wolf Conservation Center in 2016, she discovered not only the world of wolf conservation, but also a calling to help change the narrative around these incredible animals. With a background in psychology and a career as a therapist, Leokadia brings a thoughtful and compassionate perspective to her work, bridging the gap between human understanding and the wild heart of nature. Her inspiration comes from one extraordinary Mexican gray wolf named Trumpet, whose resilience and story have become the heartbeat of her book series, Trumpet the Miracle Wolf Pup. Through her writing, Leokadia seeks to dispel the bad wolf myth and highlight the vital roles these creatures play in restoring ecological balance. She donates 50% of her book's profits towards wolf conservation efforts, a true example of living one's purpose in harmony with nature. In this conversation, we explore Leokadia's journey from volunteer to author, the emotional connection that inspired her mission, and the lessons we can all learn from the wild about family, resilience, and coexistence. Thank you so much for being here today. It's great to have you. I just received an email recently from you and I think your PR agent about a new book that you have just come out with about a endangered baby wolf named Trumpet.
Yes, thank you for having me on your podcast. Yeah, she's a Mexican gray wolf. They're critically endangered, and I learned about her story, and I just really wanted to share that. And I kind of noticed that the way her story flowed, it was perfect for young children, and picture books are a great format to um, have, share stories with children.
So, have you always been a writer, or has this been something inspired over time?
So no, I am not a writer, or now I am, I guess, but I never envisioned myself writing books or children's books. It was something that fell into my lap. I started to learn about her story and I just got inspired.
Amazing. But I did see that you do have a background in psychology. And is that what your career is in? Are you still in the field of psychology?
Yeah. So I did study psychology and I currently work as a therapist. And I think I did incorporate a lot of that into the writing the books, mostly kind of knowing a little bit about developmental psychology with kids. What stages they can grasp what concepts, and also the understanding that if we give a little bit too much information to kids, sometimes that can be overwhelming. So when you do that, when you introduce a complex subject, it's best to kind of just introduce one thing at a time and clearly define that subject and then kind of leave it at that and come to it maybe at another point, which is perfect for picture books because kids want to read the story over and over and over again. So that repetition really helps solidify that concept in their.
Yeah, thanks for diving into that a little more for us. I haven't had someone on here yet who has written a children's book and kind of understands the psychological process that's going on in child development and stuff, which I think is amazing and is very important for all kids out there and for us too that are reparenting ourselves and kind of working to reconnect with the inner child within us as well. And I think you touched on a great point, and it's like the complexity of topics and stuff for young children. But I think really all of us in this day and age with technology and AI and so much content and things out there, sometimes like the simplicity of it and the mixed in with some, novelty and imagination, I feel like is more important than ever. Would you say so?
Yeah, definitely. In this day and age, with a lot of scrolling, so much information out there, sometimes, especially with kids, it's a great idea just to kind of take a step back and take a breather and just focus on like one thing at a time. Kids can understand a lot more than we give them credit for, but we do have to present it in the way that they can really understand it and learn it and not get overwhelmed by too much information at once.
Uh, and as far as you're volunteering at different rescue centers and the Wolf Conservation Center, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong. Um, what has been your experience with doing that? What kind of got you into it?
So I actually didn't even know about the Wolf Conservation Center. I had always grown up volunteering, mostly at the Greenberg Nature Center, which is pretty local to me, and that has just a variety of animals and teaches kids about nature. But it was my sister-in-law that found the Wolf Conservation Center, and she's all the way over in Italy. So it was kind of interesting that, this was in our backyard and we had no idea, my family. So she found it, wanted to visit. And of course, as I learned about it, then I was like, there's a volunteer opportunity. I like to volunteer. So I got involved, and that's how I was pretty much introduced to, I guess, Trumpet.
Yeah, so moving forward into Trumpet's story and kind of what initially inspired you about Trumpet's story and really, kind of wanting to kind of dispel the bad wolf image and highlight conservation efforts to young children.
Um, so I learned about Trumpet's story in bits and pieces. She is one of the wolves that's off exhibit, meaning that when the public comes to a program, they're not the ones that she's not one of the ones that they're going to see in person. There are web cameras, so there's plenty of opportunity to kind of observe her and make that connection in that way. But physically, the public can't see her. I think it was probably 6 months in, maybe even longer, that I first actually got to see her. And I started learning about her story, her background, her mother and father. Her father had fertility issues, and he was the number one genetically distinct wolf in the entire Mexican gray wolf population at that time. And so, of course, they wanted him to have a mess of puppies, and he really wasn't able to. And, he had just had her. And even that was a bit of a surprise for the staff there. So they just kind of named her the Miracle Wolf Pup. And, I was like, wow, that's really cute. And as I learned a little bit more about how she was actually given the name Trumpet, because she was pretty loud, and someone said she's loud like a trumpet. And so that name kind of stuck. And I was like, this is the perfect story for kids. And at some point I was like, you guys should write this story. And they were not going to write the story. They have enough to do they have a lot on their plate. And so eventually when that became clear, I thought that this was an opportunity that shouldn't pass. And so I asked if I could write it. I donate 50% of my profits back to them. And it's just a great way to include younger kids in a conversation about conservation in general, endangered species. Um, and it also does dispel this bad wolf myth. I made it an effort to make sure that just as it is normally in the case in reality. Whenever we go there, the wolves will run the other direction and keep their distance. So I made sure to kind of keep that in the illustration, showing that they really didn't try to be around people. If there was any hands on, it was basically a veterinarian check. So that way, there wasn't this. I feel like there's sometimes a dichotomy. This big bad wolf that's going to come and just run up and eat you versus, this cuddly wolf that you can kind of like, give kissies to, or this like mythical creature. And the reality is it's somewhere really in between. This is an animal, a wild animal that is very shy, elusive, and doesn't want to have anything to do with people and stays away from people as much as they can.
Beautiful. And I've been into animals throughout my life. I've gotten the pleasure to volunteer at a few places. Look forward to being able to volunteer at some more places. I have friends that work with wolves in different places, like outside of LA. I actually got to have my first wolf encounter with a wolf up in Montana in the mountains with a pack of 5 gray wolves. But the Mexican gray wolf is one that stands out in my mind as very mystical and rare because, quite frankly, they are endangered and there's not really many of them. Do you know how many are out there? Is there any still in the wild, and where those might be, and how many
Yeah.
are in captivity?
So originally when they noticed that the population was going down. They made the decision, and this was Mexico, possibly at this time in conjunction with the United States, but they decided to round them up, and they came up, I think it was like seven, and only one female. So they're all related. They brought them into captivity to start a breeding program and replenish the numbers. And Mexico gave the wolves to the United States, noting that the United States would have a greater success at being able to do that. Um, and then they were reintroduced into the wild once the numbers started going up. The program was successful in some sense, but they still had that genetic challenge because they're all related. And so they do have a wild population now in Mexico, New Mexico, and Arizona. That's their release site. And they have over 200 at this point. I think it's like 250-ish, something like that, from all three areas. And then they have the captive population. The wild population at this point they're considered full siblings. So it's really challenging as far as, being able to sustain that population or even grow it. And so they have a number of ways where they kind of reintroduce the genetic material from the captive population. The way that they do it now is through cross fostering puppies. So they will fly the puppies out from the captive mother's litter. They'll select a couple of them. Obviously, they won't take all of them, but they will select a number of them, fly them out to a site where there's another denning mother in the wild that has puppies around the same age, and they will put those puppies into the litter and the mom will adopt them. They're one of the species that will do that. So they can do that when they're still, eyes closed, can't hear or see anything, and successfully do that. But the puppies themselves, they have I think it's a less than 50% survival rate. And even after that, it's not necessarily going to be the case that those puppies that were reintroduced, the captive puppies, that they would go on and have families themselves. They might stay with the family and be like, yeah, I like it here with mama and papa, So then the case is that they wouldn't be having families of their own, that genetic material wouldn't be in the population. So, what the program really wants is to release family units. So, from the captive population to the wild. And that way, there's already a strong unit, there's already genetic material going through. And those puppies from that family, some of them will leave. And that way it spreads the genetic material. So, yeah, lots of challenges with it. And, definitely a lot of people working in this effort through conservation groups, scientists. It's a lot.
Yeah, that's quite fascinating. And yeah, it sounds like a lot of very hard work by a lot of amazing people to keep this species protected and increasing in numbers, hopefully. So moving forward, overall, just your perception of like how important do you feel the conservation of endangered species, whether it's Mexican gray wolves or other species out there on our planet, is to you and to really our human species?
It's essential. I mean, you know, we can't live, without other animals living amongst us, other wildlife, and we are connected in that way. So we really do have to have the mindset of coexisting, respecting, understanding, boundaries, and giving spaces to other species. It it only helps us as well as them. It's just once we start to get rid of wildlife around us, if that continues, we won't even have any food, let alone clean air. So we really do have to have a mindset of conserving our wildlife.
From a psychological standpoint, what do you think the importance is of these wild creatures that roam our planet? Because to me personally, I feel like there's a large significance in that reaches back to our human origins and the mythologies throughout time, that I feel like the loss of these beasts, we could say, on our planet can kind of point to almost a disconnection or almost a psychological kind of disconnection with the wild parts of ourselves.
Yeah, that's interesting. Like uh, I know that for many people, just kind of being outside in a wilder area, doesn't necessarily need to be like out in, the wilderness where there's nothing around. But I mean, just even going to a park where it's a little bit more secluded, less, less people, less technology, less everything, that it does give us an inner peace and a connection, and that it definitely is something that we should embrace and keep in mind to do every once in a while. Obviously people have lives, but to find some time to do that and to reconnect. And we do have to recognize that we always had a role in, well, always, but I mean, for a very long time, we had a role in that where, we weren't necessarily, the dominant species, that we were coexisting for a very long time. And, that's just very natural for us. So we definitely should kind of recognize that it would also be natural for us to kind of be in that space, have that connection, have that, yeah, it's just, be existing, coexisting, sorry.
Yeah, I like that. Coexisting with these beautiful creatures, helping one another thrive. Let's see. So, as far as your time working with the wolves, has there been any particular life lessons that you've kind of gleaned from the wolves or Trumpet's story that you would like to share?
So one of the things that kind of popped out to me, or kind of it was, I come back to again and again, is that I don't know that she would have necessarily chosen this role to leave her family. As far as a personality traits, she's spunky, she's wild, she's got a lot of energy, but I don't think that she would have actually left to start her own family. And that sometimes is, a characteristic that a wolf will have, saying, like, all right, I'm going to go start my own family versus I'm going to comfortable here. I'm going to stay with my current family. But she didn't have that choice. This is a critically endangered species. Now, taking the only one having the genetic material of her father was the number one genetically distinct wolf in the population at that time and had to have puppies. So she wasn't given that choice. But that being said, she dealt with it the best way she could, and she did it with grace, with honor, and with enthusiasm. So I think that is a good life lesson, that you don't always have a choice. Sometimes you're forced into a situation, and you really have to have that resiliency to be able to navigate that and to do the best that you can and have honor in that.
Yeah, to make the most of the circumstances, the cards that one is dealt, and be resilient and find the good things in the situation. Sounds like Trumpet has done a great job at showing us how to do that.
She definitely has, yeah.
I am curious, a personal question here. What do you feel like one of the most influential books has been in your life that you have read? Was it perhaps a children's book when you were a kid, or maybe a book that you've come across along your life journey?
So yeah, so I don't know the name of the book, but it was in third grade, and it's completely off subject, but in third grade, or it might have been second grade, but we had an assignment during February. We had to choose an influential um, African American person, and we had a select number of choices, and I was still fairly young and didn't know, and most of us didn't. And of course, coming from a child, you don't know what you don't know. You're still in the process of learning. So, of course, there was a selection of books, and I obviously wasn't the first one to choose the books. So, Martin Luther King, Harriet Tubman, those books were chosen, and I was so upset because I knew of them. And so I wanted to do my little report about one of those books. And so I got Frederick Douglass, and I had no idea who he was. And so obviously, you still have to do the assignment. So I'm reading the book, and I was just wowed. And I was like, how did I not know who this person was? And so that, not only did I learn about him, but I learned that there's so much more to learn and so many people that you don't know. And so that really influenced me. So I don't recall. It's obviously a book that's for kids.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think being exposed to projects like that in our childhood that challenge us to learn about others' lives and their stories can be very inspiring for our own stories, and yeah, just overall kind of stoke curiosity about what is out there, because there's so many fascinating animals and fascinating people to learn about, and there's always more and more to learn, and that's what's really so cool about animals and ecosystems and the natural world, because we're constantly redefining and kind of rediscovering what we thought we knew, or discovering new points, whether it's in science or citizen science, through forms like wildlife tracking. And that's actually what I've been very into recently, and where I've come across wolves with people I've been with. And just very cool to know that, even in this day and age, you could be a kid right now, you could read this story, you could be inspired to become a conservationist, and there's still so much out there to learn that can help us both on this planet survive. Is there anything top of mind for you that you want to share about your suite of books, or the process of it, the art design, maybe who's designed your art for the book?
Yeah, the illustrator is Maddie Moore. She did a really amazing job. And this is also where I kind of came into it with my psychology background. Uh, I really wanted the audience to connect with the wolves. So one way that I kind of did that was I asked her not to do an illustration when in her illustrations of the people, to do the illustration where the person is looking at the reader. So the eyes would be covered, you'd see part of their face. But with the wolves, that the kids would actually see the eyes, the full face, the emotion that's portrayed. That way, the wolf is the focal point, even though the people play an instrumental role in the story, that they are not the focal point. And she did a wonderful job with that. I'm really happy.
Yes, just from what I've seen online, the artwork looks amazing. So is there, how many books are in the series of this? Is there four?
Yeah, so I'm launching the fourth book right now, so should be out when this podcast airs. So the fourth one is the subtitle. So the title is Trumpet the Miracle Wolf Pup, and the subtitle is Trumpet Becomes a Mom. And so each book takes a snippet of Trumpet's life. So the beginning is the introduction, starts off with her parents and introduces kids to the species and conservation. The second book is more her growing up. So Trumpet grows up is the subtitle, and it's goes through pup development, which is quite interesting. They grow up super quickly just to be able to survive, in the winter that first year. They really have to be prepared physically and also, be able to assist the pack with hunting and not, slowing the pack down. Um, the third book was actually the moment when she left her family. In that one, I really wanted to emphasize that initial fear of leaving, everything that she knew, going to a new place, being by herself, kind of that, contrasting being scared, but at the same time being brave and just kind of moving on. And then the introduction to her mate, which interestingly was he was flown from Arizona to the Wolf Conservation Center. And it was a group of pilots that donate their flights to endangered species. They're called Light Hawk Conservation Flying. And as a thank you, he was nicknamed Light Hawk. And so, again, that was the perfect opportunity to um, highlight this part of conservation. Everybody thinks it's just, staff at these centers and, a staff at the U.S. Fish and Wildlife that deal with conservation. It is a vast number of people that really do just make us able to conserve these animals. And then, yeah, so then the fourth book, I focus on family, also education. So obviously family, Trumpet starting her own family, and the bonding that creates. I also included that, families come in all different sizes, different dynamics. There are some families at these centers, including the Wolf Conservation Center, that are just siblings, but they still consider themselves a full family. And there are some families where there's only one mom or one dad, and they even have that on occasion in the wild if one parent is killed or dies somehow. And they have that at the Wolf Conservation Center as well. Same reason, a parent passed on. And so I kind of wanted to include that as well in the story, that it's, even though the family structure typically with packs is mother, father, and then the puppies, that, sometimes it's not. So I thought that was really a nice outlook, that even though if it is not, that they still consider themselves a family. And then the education portion, I wanted to highlight that, a great way uh, to assist in conservation is to bring it into classrooms, libraries, that there is an opportunity to learn about these animals, in that way, and as well as visiting a conservation center. They have programs at the Wolf Conservation Center that they really do a great outline of the history and also the biology, and it's very interesting. Zoos sometimes will do events, or you can kind of do some research and visit the animals and see the animals, but just kind of spreading the word, that's an essential way to assist with conservation.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for taking this story on and really sharing this for everything it'll do for the species and for the future of conservation and the inspiration of these young children that can get exposed to the book, or even the parents that are reading them to the kids, or if we just read them ourselves. I think I need to get me a couple copies so I can really experience what you're talking about here. Yeah, do you feel like the children in this modern age and kind of the modern era, have you seen uh, in a growing interest in them getting into conservation and showing up to these centers and the zoos? Like, is that still alive as it's ever been?
I think it's actually more alive now than it has ever been. Yeah, when go to a school or a library, do a reading, once I say, this is a story about a wolf and that she's a real wolf, I mean, the eyes just light up and they are ready to go. And I just get so many questions about Trumpet, about these wolves. They really are so enthusiastically interested in this subject. And so it really is a great opportunity, uh, you know, to have the conversation and also, dispel the myth. That kids were told, this bad myth at a very young age. It sometimes was the first thing that they learned about, and I should put learned about wolves, because in these stories like Little Red Riding Hood, Three Little Pigs, they've been told that this wolf is bad. When that's the first thing that you learn about wolves, it really sets this image in, especially if it's a fearful image, it solidifies. And so it's such a big hurdle to kind of then dispel when that's the first thing that you were told. And so that's part of the reason why I wanted these books to be for younger kids, so that there would be an opportunity for the a more truthful image to be set in, that the wolf is not a monster, but also is not, a little teddy bear to cuddle. That the wolf is an animal to be respected, has feelings, has emotions. And I really thought that this was a great opportunity, her story in particular, to make a connection with younger kids, being that she was the only puppy. And kids at a very young age, their relation they're learning about is usually about one character and not multiple characters. So her being just the sole puppy really gave the opportunity for kids to connect to her. And then, as I went in, that so many aspects of her life highlight conservation, I thought it just really was a great opportunity to have this story for young kids.
So wonderful. I wish I would have gotten to come across this when I was a
Right.
kid, because
Yeah.
you're so right about the myths that we believe in that we really never know are true until you become more educated or you challenge the belief systems that have kind of been ingrained in your mind. Because I think most people are exposed to the Little Red Riding Hood story and the Big Bad Wolf, and if you constantly kind of demonized all of these animals like sharks and wolves and bears, then it just creates this general fear and misperception of them in the wild and really who they are and how they interact with us. So beautiful work in doing this and helping rewrite a much more true narrative for young children and really all people, and how that can ripple out and inspire us to get to know wildlife in a more intimate way and really truly understand it rather than these false narratives that may have us misperceiving these wild beasts. So, to cap off the show, as part of my research for the Live Thrivingly project, which is a project that captures human beings' perception of what it means to live thrivingly on this planet, I'd love to know, when you hear the phrase live thrivingly, how do you interpret this? What does this mean to you?
So I would say embracing living in the moment with hope, with wanting to change the future for the better. So that's, I guess, my perception of that. That I feel like sometimes that we hold ourselves back a lot, just from, I guess, fear, perhaps, just staying in your comfort zone. And I feel like if we would just take the step forward, embrace things that are coming our way, I think that, we could really live thrivingly.
Beautiful answer. And I'm sure with your journey as an author and writing these stories and kind of taking that step, uh, was one you felt very called to do, but it's also not a very easy one always either, to really work through a project of that size and then to keep it going and all the connected parts and everything. So I'm sure that that was, a big part in your journey of taking the step and challenging yourself and doing new things, going in new directions.
Oh yeah, very much out of my comfort zone. Almost everything about this is me learning something new. So it um, it definitely has taken me places I never thought that I would be doing.
So after all these books, like, is there more to come in the future? Are you gonna continue to write about wolves, or are you gonna ever move into different endangered species and create some more children's books, or are you just gonna keep it in this lane?
So right now, I definitely want to complete her story in this series. I kind of mentioned the cross fostering, the puppies being flown out to the wild. She actually has cross fostered pups in the wild, and so I wanted to include that in her series. One of those puppies was actually found in the wild. He was about 5 months old when they did a wolf capture for the wild wolves, and they all got a chip. So when they scanned the chip, they realized it was one of her puppies. They gave him a collar and started tracking his movements. So there is a potential to have a story about him, and that I think would be for an older child book. So maybe an early reader, we'll see. But I definitely want to complete Trumpet's, story, and then we'll see how I move on from there.
Well, thank you so much for coming on today, Leokadia.
Yeah.
Any last words?
Just if people could ask their libraries to get the books, spread the word. Just I really think that hers is a great story to tell to kids, and I'm super honored to be one of the people to be able to assist in that project. So yeah, we'd love her story to get out everywhere. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. And where can people find your book, or any locations they can find more information about getting it or connecting with you?
So the books can be purchased on pretty much all online retailers, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, some of the lesser known online retailers. There are some indie bookstores that are starting to carry the books. Book Love in Massachusetts and Bedford Books in New York. But pretty much the online retailers is probably the easiest way. Or you can get them at the Wolf Conservation Center, also can sell them online. So newyorkwolf.org. And of course, the Wolf Conservation Center is a great place to learn more about these wolves or wolves in general, and also other wildlife. They have a number of educators that, can either guide people to a program or answer a particular question if someone had that. But yeah, I would definitely reach out to them.
Being on this call today. Really enjoyed it. I look forward to spreading more news about your book and keeping up with the journey.
Thank you. And I really appreciate you having me on.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Live Thrivingly podcast. I'm your host, Jackson Hall, and I hope you found inspiration and valuable insights to help you thrive in both your personal and professional life. Remember, the journey to living thrivingly is one step at a time, and we're here to walk that path with you. If you enjoyed today's episode, please consider subscribing, leaving a review, and sharing it with someone who could benefit from these conversations. For more resources and updates, be sure to visit my website at livethrivingly.com or visit my social media page at Instagram at livethrivingly. And as always, continue to live thrivingly because you deserve to live a life full of purpose, vitality, and joy. Until next time, take care and keep thriving.